Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 234 of the Reformed Gamers, a show all about theology, video games, and learning a lot about parenting from God of War Ragnarok. I'm your host, or one of your hosts, Logan.
And I'm his co-host, Micah.
And joining us, if you're watching on YouTube, you've already seen another handsome bearded man with his spectacles. I almost said monocle, but that's not a monocle. Those are glasses. I'm already ruining this. Nate from the Backlog Breakdown is joining us yet again. Nate, man, say hello to the gamers.
Hey, guys. I'm sorry. I'm back. You thought you could get rid of me, but you didn't.
He's like that cool uncle that, like, you're happy to see him, but at the same time, you're like, wait a minute, what's about to go down? So
Shenanigans.
A lot of shenanigans, a lot of chicanery. If you will.
Yeah.
That's a fun word I learned here recently, chicanery. So
I like that one. I like it.
It's a good one. I would encourage more people to use it because it's just fun to say. Chicanery. Chicanery. I'm serious. Dear listeners, try saying it. We can't hear you, but it's fun to say regardless. But in case you didn't hear at the top of the show, or maybe you ignored the cover art for this episode, maybe you ignored the title, you saw a new episode of TRG hit your feed, and you're like, yes, download, listen, and all that. We're talking about God of War Ragnarok for this episode, and we're doing this episode a little bit differently, but I'll get to that when we get into talking about the game itself, and you'll kind of see what that's all about. But a few things to kind of get out of the way before we get into the show proper. You've probably noticed the YouTube channel has, there's been a lot of tumbleweeds flowing by there, but not a whole lot of uploads. That's because I'm working on a few things, trying to what we can do with the content over there. And so we'll be gearing up YouTube content back up over there in February. And so we've got some things. I've got some ideas. I talked with Nate about maybe a possible Marvel Snap podcast at some point. And so might be bringing that to the YouTube channel because I still can't. I mean, I'll talk about it later in what you've been playing, so I won't talk about it now. But yeah, so just kind of taking January to kind of assess things, take a look at everything, and kind of get a feel for what we can do going forward, what would be best with time, how I can fit in all the editing and stuff like that, and what would really work best. And so keep an eye out over there. But that being said, if you're not in the Discord server, you need to get over there. A lot of fun stuff, but I'll save all that for later. As always, links to everything that we talk about will be in your show notes, but let's get into the show proper with a little bit of what we have been playing. And Nate, you're the guest of honor. You get to go first, man. Tell us, regale us with stories of the games that you've been playing, man.
Well, I mean, given is Marvel Snap because I pretty much play it every day. But
buddy.
I wasn't gonna like go too in depth on it. I've been playing a little bit of Destiny 2 lately. Sort of getting. I am way behind in story content. But just I came to Destiny 2 pretty late. So, but yeah. That one's a little tough because of my son. Destiny requires a little bit more time and attention, and he's 2 months old, and he requires a fair amount of time and attention. And so when push comes to shove, like if you have to pick, you pick the one that is a small human versus
Nate,
the video
are you
game.
telling me you're not getting your weekly strikes done?
I am.
He's getting those done, but the strikes are in a different form than what he expects.
for sure. But as far as other, so those things are kind of always in the background lately. But I've been playing Chained Echoes, and a lot of people have been hearing about this game. It's a really sort of gorgeous love letter to the sort of 90s era JRPGs. There's a lot, like Chrono Trigger is deeply embedded in the DNA, but then I'm seeing some like Xenogears in there. I've seen some other sort of bits and pieces, like maybe some elements of Phantasy Star as well. So it's like this thing is like really it's a really interesting homage. I'm not super far into it.
Okay.
Just enough to say like I'm probably about 4 or 5 hours into it at this point in time, and it's like it still feels really good. There's a lot of there's a lot to it. It kind of. All of the combat is there's a lot of menus and sub-menus and stuff, and they're constantly sort of still trickling out oh, well, here's this new subsystem. And that feels like a bit much. That's part of the 90s stuff that I'm like, ooh, we could have done without some of that. Yeah. But it's still really cool. It's got an interesting story. It's like gorgeous, sort of that 16-bit style art.
Yeah.
I'm also playing Attack of the Friday Monsters, which is on my 3DS. And
Okay, I've never heard of this game.
it's a really weird. I forget what there was 2 runs of this, 2 volumes of this, but they were sort of these like side projects that Level 5 ended up publishing. And I don't know much about it. There's like I think 10 of these, and like I said, they did them in 2 sort of runs, and they're just smaller, sort of like digital only titles that Level 5 published on the 3DS. It's one of those things where it's kind of been, hence the backlog breakdown. It's been on my backlog for like a couple years at this point. It seems like sort of a shorter like thing, and there's kaiju involved. And so like you tell me there's like giant monsters and potentially like, Ultraman-esque heroes to fight them. Like I'm into that. Not like Wesley Ray, but I'm still into that. So, but yeah, and again, I'm not super far into that. That one's kind of hard. It's real weird to describe other than it's interesting.
Nate, I was looking at Chained Echoes to go back to that one, and it's developed by one fella, a guy named Matthias Lenda, I believe, if Google is telling me correctly. And just another one of it's becoming a trend where you kind of have these maestros, for lack of a better word, just kind of whipping up games on their own, whether it's Tom Happ, whether it's this guy.
He did have some, like, there were some subcontractors, I think, for some of the non-critical art, and I think for music as well. But yeah, pretty much it's the one, like a one-man kind of, it's his, sort of like pet project.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. That blows my mind because I've only played... I dipped into Chain Echoes for maybe an hour at most, if that, during the winter break, and was pretty impressed at just the quality of it. And I was like, yeah, I see the Chrono Trigger comparisons here in terms of the gameplay and the aesthetic and things like that. Micah, you're about to get into one game that was made by, like, I think 3 or 4 people, if that. It's just, that blows my mind. It always blows my mind when I play a game and I'm like, man, this was really good, and then I discover it was made by, like, literally a handful of people, and it's like, wait, what?
Yeah, there's the kind of games that are like, this is really, really good, like something like Axiom Verge comes to mind.
Yes.
But it doesn't really blow up. And then there's the one guy makes it like Minecraft, and it's like a thing. It's
still
like,
a thing, which is crazy.
It's all over the spectrum where like it could really be something. But anyway, I'll go ahead and dive into what I've been playing, and Logan alluded to it. I've been the patrons were caught a little bit of, we were talking about some Microsoft stuff and some of the layoffs, and I was talking about how I'm going to speak more kindly about Microsoft this episode because, and Logan, I told you I was going to do it because it just where I'm hitting with like what's in the PlayStation library and what I have coming up to play. I was like, it's a good time to turn Game Pass back on and kind of catch up on some of these games from 2022 that I haven't played and just see kind of what's in the library. And so, of course, you can't turn Game Pass on without booting up that daggum Vampire Survivors. Had to check out what that was all about. There's tons of buzz. Nate, I know you were curious about my opinion on it because you were saying it didn't seem like a game that I would necessarily be into.
So I played it on my phone, and the mobile version leaves a little bit to be desired, in my opinion.
Okay.
But like, honestly, knowing your tastes, I was like, dude, this is Nate bait. Because it's all about like the weird builds and stuff like that. I'm like, but Micah tends to be like a little.
Yeah. So I can't speak to the mobile version, though I do have some thoughts kind of in that realm. But this game, Vampire Survivors, the best way to describe it for those who haven't played it is like, imagine if you're Bo Jackson in Tecmo Bowl, but you have weapons. If you know Bo Jackson, you can just run around the defense and you're never going to get caught back in Super Tecmo Bowl days. And this is you can run slightly faster than most enemies, but you have weapons that just randomly go off. All you do is control the left analog stick. That's it. And your weapons randomly fire off. And the hordes start coming. Yeah, you just control the left stick, and you start off with one weapon, and then every other enemy you kill, you collect a gem, and you collect so many gems, you level up, then you get another weapon or an upgrade to the current one, or you choose. So you're going to get offered every time you level up, you get offered 3 upgrades. You can, it's going to be random. Kind of like think Hades a little bit, if for something more kind of familiar and modern, where like a run is dependent highly on kind of the upgrades that they toss at you whenever you get going, and so it's kind of a run can be like made or broke. That's a weird way to say it. From the things you get, from the upgrades you get offered randomly. But it feels to me like a twin stick shooter without the other kind of stick.
Yeah.
Like it scratches that same itch where like I'm carving my way out through the enemies. I'm shooting forward. So that's my path forward to get through everyone is this path that I'm shooting forward kind of. And it scratches the same itches as something like, Geometry Wars or Super Stardust or something like that. You
will die a lot in this game.
Sure. Especially early on. But man, I feel like I got powerful quick. I've unlocked maybe 9 of the characters, and I have almost all of the items in the store unlocked, all the upgrade items before you kind of get rolling. Played maybe 10 hours of it. I'm not really sure how much I've played, but I get the allure. It's really, really fun. All the weapon combinations and the upgrade combinations you can do. And if you get certain ones, they evolve into something brand new. All that's really, really cool, but it still feels like a mobile game to me. Like it still kind of like has that mobile game stink and like that shallowness on it. What you laughing at?
I'm sorry. I was looking up gameplay because I realized like I've never actually seen this game before, and I looked it up and I'm like, this is. A couple things came to mind. First of all, the trailer I watched had like little snippets of different reviews, and the first one that came up was like, "Oh gosh, what time is it?" And I'm like, what? But I'm sitting there looking at it, I'm like, this looks super cheap. Really, like it definitely looks like a phone game. But then it dawned on me, I was like, why does this look so familiar? And I was like, oh my gosh. So I use Blookit, which is like a gamified type of review thing you can do with your students for your classes. You can make your own reviews and they answer questions and you can play a different variety of games. They copied Vampire Survivors, except what they made looks better and higher quality than Vampire Survivor stuff.
I heard that it had some knockoffs already brewing.
That's wild. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a crazy game.
Well,
I didn't really know what it was for a little while
what's
either. Go
interesting
ahead,
about that game is that it's sort of like this dude's like sort of like he was just like, I'm bored, I'm gonna make a game, but he's had been some sort of like engineer on social media stuff, so it's got like these like perfectly tuned, like almost like the loops are just like built to sort of just trigger dopamine like constantly. Like this game is just like
dopamine rush.
It is dopamine loop the game. It's like, oh, you play a little bit, reward, play a little bit, reward.
100%. That's kind of what I wanted to kind of crack down on was like I get the allure. I get why like people have kind of gone crazy about it. It's like, oh, it's the game of the year, which I feel like is kind of.
That's a bad take.
That's kind of bogus.
Come on.
That's a bad take.
But anyway.
No, people who are saying, I've heard people say that too. It's not a good take. I'm just like, no. It's
Dude, I've seen it nominated for Game of the Year at like legit game award shows and stuff.
No. Are you serious?
It's a fascinating game, but that's a bad take and people should feel bad.
Come on.
Anyway, it's fun. It's really good. I get the allure, but I'll move on. That's Vampire Survivors. I've also, Logan, at your review last episode had me. I like I said, I was already hooked a little bit on this game, but then you drug me under there. It's Signalis. I had to boot up Signalis. That's out there on the Game Pass.
I want to hear it, man. I've been waiting to hear you talk about this. Give it to me, man. I want to know what you think.
Well, first of all, I beat it last night. I really wanted to try to roll credits before we recorded, and I did that last night. I like this game a lot.
Yes.
It's for those of you that know me, or if you don't know me, Resident Evil is one of my very favorite franchises in all of video games. Resident Evil 2 was the first game I actually bought for my PlayStation 1 back in the day. It was the first game I owned. Mega huge influence. So that style holds a special place in my heart, that gameplay style of Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. And this game is a love letter to that genre, that specific style of game, which really only Resident Evil pulled it off in this way. And there are some other influences, I think, for Signalis, but Resident Evil is easily the primary influence, whether it's the notes that you come across and you read, the way puzzles are implemented. I got to get the crest, the hexagon-shaped crest and put it in the hexagon-shaped, thing. So it's very much like that. It has the same kind of map system where it's room by room, very easy to read. You can see what you still got to get in a room and what's all that kind of stuff, or if you've already done it. So it's an easy kind of quality of life kind of map. The only thing I didn't like about it was the narrative. I thought was a little. I mean, it's just the closing cutscene, Logan. I don't know if you recall it. It's just like, what I just watched, man. Like, what even is this?
And that's the thing I was going to ask you at some point. It's like, which ending did you get? Because I think there's 2 to 3, maybe 4 endings to this game.
Well, I'm not sure. Then I need to go. I didn't realize there were multiple endings.
Yeah.
About halfway through the game, I kind of started breezing through some of the story-related text documents you would get. It just was kind of too much, and I wasn't really into it a whole lot. Okay. So I just the story just didn't really hook me like some of the old Resident Evil games have. But everything else really good. It's a good ode to the original Resident Evil games. But yeah, that's a good one. And lastly, real quick, I'm taking up too much time. I played like a little bit of Somerville, like an hour or so. It's it's pretty good. I think it didn't review particularly well, and so far I think I see why with some of the controls and stuff. But it's got a good narrative. It hooks in me. It's like a 4-hour game, but I've just played like a little bit. But I'm gonna play through Somerville. So yeah, been playing that. It's good so far. So yeah.
Okay, right on. Yeah, man, we'll talk after the show, and you'll have to let me know kind of like what the ending you got was, because it might be the same one as me, but I don't know. I was shocked when I looked it up and was like, oh, there's multiple endings. I didn't know that. Cool.
Just to sort of, Signalis has been on my radar for a while, but hearing both of you endorse it recently, I'm like, it sort of ratchets it up for me, and I'm like,
yeah, dude.
I need it. I kind of need it.
You got to get on it, man. You got to get on it, dude. Like, I'm telling you, if you like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, oh my gosh, you got to check it out.
I will say, last thing real quick about Signalis, I didn't find it as scary as the old Resident Evil games. No. But still scratches that itch,
Yeah. There's like a few moments where like it genuinely gets you because it's like the first of something, but then after that, it's like, okay, I'm used to this. It's whatever.
Sure.
So, but yeah, it's funny though, because like when you boot the game up, it gives you a warning. Like some people consider parts of this game to be cruel or like gross or morbid or whatever, and I'm like, whoa. But then you get through it and you're like, yeah, there's some things in here, but it's not.
It's
not
pretty
like,
typical.
Yeah, it's not Silent Hill 2 levels or Resident Evil 2
It's nothing
remake
crazy.
Like that. Yeah. It's totally fine. Well, that leads into what I've been playing. Y'all, welcome to the Persona/Marvel Snap Hour, the podcast, where that's all I'm going to be talking about for the next several episodes. Because the night that we're recording, January 18th, Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden are going to be dropping on PlayStation, Nintendo Switch. I think it's on Steam already. So your boy's going to be jumping into Persona 3 very, very soon. But before that, I was like, can I beat Persona 5 Royal before Persona 3 comes out? No, that was a dumb undertaking. But that didn't stop me from putting 20 hours into it. So
there you go.
That's where I'm at. I'm currently in June in Persona 5 Royal. And I have to say this. I was mistaken, or I didn't listen to people very well when they were talking about Royal when it came out, because I was under the impression all the new stuff was in like that third semester, whatever, the extra semester, like way later in the game. But I'm sitting here playing it, and like even within 10 hours, I'm like, there's stuff in here either I don't remember at all from Persona 5, or this is brand new. Like you have, like the Personas now have different traits or something like that give them like different perks and things. And when you fuse them together, you can choose which perk they get. I'm like, I don't remember that from Persona 5. That seems different. And the new character, there's a couple new characters that you meet pretty early on, and I was like, I don't remember this counselor character. This must be a new character.
He's new.
And then, okay, so yeah, I didn't know he was, you would encounter him that early in the game. And then the new female student with the red hair and the ponytail that's in gymnastics, you meet her pretty early on. And I was like, man, I thought all the new stuff was like at the end of the game, but I'm getting a lot of the new stuff now. And I'm like, if I would have known that, I would have played this a lot sooner, because this really feels like a whole new game to me, and I think it also helps just because there's been so much time put between me and the original game that it's like there's a lot I just don't remember, and so. But it's been good playing it again. Really have been enjoying it. I'm following a guide, of course, because I'm gonna try and go for the platinum in one run, and so I'm like, if I'm gonna play this game, I might as well get as many of the trophies as I possibly can. I've already messed up a couple times, so I'm a little worried that might keep me from getting it. But it's just whatever. I'm just enjoying playing this game again, and I'm like, I forgot how good this game was in a lot of different ways, just from the characters to just the combat, just the art design itself is really kind of cool to look at and just see kind of what they did and how people's palaces or like their manifestations of their heart's desires, look like. And it's like, man, this is just, it's just really creative. It's really unique. And I just have been really enjoying getting back into it. It's been a good time. So,
yep. Logan, you sound like me last episode talking about Death Stranding director's cut and how like I couldn't remember. I was like, is this new content or am I just forgetting? And it seems like games have really figured out how to lace in the new stuff with that old stuff, and just it's less like, here's your DLC for Fallout 3 and it's its own separate thing, you got to find it.
Right.
It's like it's just naturally laced in. I know it's a director's cut, kind of a re-release thing,
sure,
but the way they lace that stuff in these days and a lot of games like this, I feel like is just, that's the way to do it. That's the way to kind of consume that and go back through it. So anyway, just want to make that correlation.
Yeah, and it's really cool. And for those who care, I found like forgetting it's is it Kichijoro, I think, is the new city marketplace that you unlock. I found that, and I'm like, there's just so much stuff to do. I was like, man, this is really kind of cool. I kind of wish I wasn't following a guide so I could just kind of go meander about and do my own thing, but I'm sure I'll get to all the new stuff. It's been really good though. I've been enjoying going back into it.
Very cool.
The last thing I'm going to talk about, of course, is Marvel Snap. And I got to say, I was getting to a point with this game where I was kind of like, man, I'm kind of getting burnt out with this game. I'm kind of getting tired of it. I'm sick of like opening the collector's caches and all I get is avatars or titles or whatever. I'm like, this is kind of dumb, whatever. And then on one particular day, I think it might have been Monday, I was having just a crappy day, right? Maybe it was Sunday. No, it might have been, I can't remember. It was one of the earlier days this week. And I'm sitting there playing it, and I open up a collector's cache. I'm like, cool, what kind of stupid title am I going to get this time? I open that thing up. Okay, and y'all, I hate loot boxes. I just want to preface that with this. I might be changing my tune on loot boxes after this because the collector's cache opened, and it gave me freaking Galactus, one of the rarest, most powerful cards in the game. And now I'm just like I opened it, and I looked at my wife, and I was like, I got Galactus. And she's like, cool, is that like a sickness? What is that? And I'm like, no, it's the most powerful card in the game. She's like, cool, I'm happy for you. And then I just proceeded to play with Galactus, build a deck around him, and man, it's been fun to watch how people react. For those who don't know, because if you don't play Marvel Snap, or maybe you haven't seen the card, Galactus is a 6-cost 2-power card that when you play it on a lane by himself, he destroys the other 2 locations. And so if you put him in a deck with like Electro or Wave, so you can play him pretty early, and then you combine that with Death or Gamora or even Shang-Chi to kind of defeat their 9+ power cards, it's kind of disgusting. It's kind of crazy. It's better than Leader, but
not
it's
by much.
Pretty wild. I'd say by a lot. That animation where it zooms out and his hand goes over the planet and blows it up. It's like, this is cool.
I think at one point in time I tweeted out the slimiest play I've ever seen, and I was impressed and repulsed by it. Was turn 5, somebody hobgoblined me on a location, and I was like, okay, no big deal. Turn 6, they Galactused me, and I was just like, awesome. I was like, thank you. Like, I hate everything now, and it's and I was just like, it's a really cool card, and I think he's actually got some great balance. Yeah, but I'll save that. Galactus is
Logan,
awesome. I'm super jealous.
Yeah.
Have you lost a match yet with Galactus?
Oh, plenty, dude. There's
okay.
That's the thing. There's like Galactus is a really cool card, and really at this point, I'm just kind of playing it just to watch him blow up the locations and just kind of have fun watching the thing because I got it. But there's plenty of ways to screw that deck up and counter it. I don't want people to think this card is like just an instant cube winner and like will carry you to infinite like super easily. You still have to manage what you play wisely if you can, and there's still plenty of ways to counter it. But it's when it works, it works. And it's funny Nate brought up, someone hobgoblined him and then played Galactus. I've done that several times, and I understand why people do it. It's kind of fun.
Oh no, dude! Like I would do it if I could. But I don't have Galactus yet. I think it's like you said though, Logan. You do need like sort of everything to like line up, just right. Like my favorite place, and I'm not trying to hijack this. Turn 4, play Wong. Turn 5, play Black Panther. Turn 6, play Arnim Zola. You get these like ridiculous like it and if you play in the where ongoing effects are doubled, everything loses its mind. And I had 2 Black Panthers who were 1,000 power plus show up on the board.
That is disgusting.
The fact that they let me do that, I was just like, I screen capped it and I was like, this is my favorite thing ever. Like, I can't believe you just let me. They were like, oh, no, keep going. I was like, okay. Like, you're going to let me do it. I'm going to keep doing it. And
I think I saw you tweet that out, and I saw like how high power those Black Panthers were, and I was like, what the heck? Because I've been trying to get that combo to work for weeks, and to see you pull it off, oh my gosh, it was more beautiful than what I imagined.
Dude, like you throw Wong out, and it's like almost next turn you're guaranteed an Enchantress or a Cosmo. Like and I see Wong, and I'm like, nope, we're shutting that down. Like,
yeah.
But I was like,
my favorite.
They let me do it. I was like, oh, okay.
My favorite. See, that's the thing, and we'll get into God of War after this, but like that's the thing is, I've even seen, because when I first got Wong and I was trying to get used to him and use the combos and try to figure it out, right? I saw someone play Rogue on that same lane and take his ability, and then they beat me by playing like, I think there was a Wolf's Bane that they played, and then there was some other card. It might have been Ironheart. So they boosted all their other cards, and I'm just like, what the heck? Like, how did you anticipate that? Like, I don't know, man. That game's nuts.
Wolfsbane is like the poor man's version of Jessica Jones or Black Panther. And she can get, like, if you get her in that sort of loop too, she can get pretty gnarly. Not that gnarly, but she gets pretty grody.
But good enough. Yeah, man. Yeah, we got to do a Marvel Snap podcast, man, so we can just gush about this, talk about combos, all that stuff, what people in Pool 1 and 2 can do, because there's a lot of people in TRG that just started playing, and so they're still in Pool 1 , so they need the tips,
Pool 1's
man.
like the most fun.
We got to guide them.
Because you don't have all, like it gets fun with all the crazy stuff, but Pool 1, it's like the tighter, more limited builds. It's actually just like, yeah. But yeah.
It's more fun, especially because like you're upgrading stuff pretty consistently too, so you feel like you're making progress at a really good pace. Whereas like now I'm close to the end of Pool 3, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is taking forever. Like why? Just why? Why? Like, I'm glad I got Galactus in all these cards. I got Galactus.
He is a Glock.
He's a Glock. He just comes out and just blows up.
Well, Logan, I gotta ask: Have you used Khazar from the Savage Land recently?
You know what's funny? I have a Khazar. What's it called? It's a Zabu Zoo deck.
Kazoo deck.
And Khazar is it? Yeah. And it's actually a lot of fun. It's pretty cool. I got the little fancy variant from the season pass that's all super cool looking. He's looking all scary and mean, and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool.
Whenever you guys get on the Marvel Snaps, I'm just like the mom listening to their son rattle off about like some anime or something. I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's nice.
Logan, I won't. You don't have to answer this on recording. Have you bought any of the bundles yet?
Why would you do me like that, man? You know I bought some of the... I can say this because I even admitted in the Discord server, I was like, look, because we were talking about like, man, I don't want to know how much money I've spent in this game. And some people were like, man, how much money have I spent in this game? And I was like, look, guys, if I were to show you my receipt, all it would say at the bottom is, you're welcome for this game being free, is what it would say, okay? Now, to be fair, I got Christmas money, right? And I was like, what am I going to spend on this? You know,
Well, I'm talking specifically the
obviously-
Savage Land bundles.
No, I haven't. If there's not tokens in there, they're not worth it, man. They're not worth it.
They got me. They got me on that. I was like,
really?
and dude,
So did you get the Sabertooth
You
White Tiger one?
suckers. Oh my goodness.
Wow,
I'm probably going to use some like gift card money that I have to get. Devil Dino is like
Nate,
my
stop.
favorite. He's my favorite
I
card
mean,
in the game.
Devil Dinosaur variant's pretty cool.
And that
though.
card-
the Devil Dinosaur variant's really
he's just
cool.
like he's like the best card. He's like the best card.
Oh my gosh, we got to stop. Mike is over here laughing at us. All of our listeners are just cringing. Let's save this for the Marvel Snap podcast coming soon to a podcast near you. But like, really, you bought the? I'm sorry. Let's get into God of War. I can't believe you bought the bundles, man. Like why? Like the Spider-Man salmon. I can't judge you. I can't judge you.
Dude,
I've
those
bought-
Savage Land
I bought almost all the
variants are
holidays.
I can.
so good.
I can judge both
You
of
can
you.
judge
Those
us.
those
You can
Savage
judge
Land
us.
variants are just that's like the best art.
Oh. I'm not gonna fight you on that one because those variants were super cool. They got like I think it was the artist who did the covers for Iron Maiden to do those. I think or some maybe it's Megadeth. Either way, they're super cool looking. Like I was tempted, but I was like at the same time, no.
There's a feature coming, and I know that we got to get on God of War, but there's a feature coming where it'll tell you who the artist is that did that.
Oh, it's already
Is
in
it?
there.
I haven't.
Yeah, if you go to your collection, open up a card, and tap the top part where the character's name is, it'll bring it down and show you who did the pencils and who did the colors.
So
That's cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
So,
Alex-
that's pretty
Alex
dope. I
Horley.
do like that.
it did the Savage Land variants.
That's it. Yeah. So if any of you listening know who that is, it's like seriously, and especially if you like his work, go look up those variants because they are actually super cool. Like I said, I almost bought them, but I was like, I just don't use those cards.
They're pretty.
enough. Except now I'm using Sabertooth all the time, and now I kind of
Sabertooth is in a destruction deck. Sabertooth is chef kiss.
Yeah.
All right.
Dang, maybe I should have bought them. All right, let's move on to God of War. All right, dear listeners. Like I said at the top of the show, we're doing this a little differently, partially because I just didn't have time, and there's other things going on, so I didn't get time to really look up like development history like we normally do, go over the development highlights of that. So I was just thinking for this episode and maybe future episodes, we'll see kind of how this goes. Just kind of foregoing that so we can just jump into talking about the game and we can really flesh out that conversation and touch on all the points that we want to talk about without feeling like we need to rush through certain things. And so we'll just do that from here on out. So what that also means, though, is that spoiler zone is like right now. So if you don't want any part of this game spoiled, you need to pause it, go play the game. It'll take you like 26 to 30 hours to do so, and then come on back and then listen to this, okay? But if you don't care about spoilers or if you play the game, continue listening and we'll hop into it. So just warning you, you're going to hear sirens. If you're listening on public feeds, you probably already heard them. So we're in spoiler territory, okay? I've given you enough time to duck out. I don't want to hear any tweets. I wouldn't hear the tweets. I would read them. But you get what I'm saying. Here we go. All right, gentlemen. God of War Ragnarok dropped last, November? I think it was November, wasn't it? And so kind of what I want to do is jump into this conversation about the game because there's, Mike, as you were saying in the pre-show, there's a lot to this game. And with this game specifically, I agree, there's a lot to it. Part of it because of just how stinking long this game is. But there's also a lot of different themes at play, and there's a lot of things going on. And so really at the start, just from the start here, what I want to do is just ask y'all kind of what your initial thoughts of the game were. Again, we are in spoiler territory, so we can talk about whatever we want. And Nate, you are the guest of honor, man. Start us off, man. What did you think about God of War Ragnarok?
So I think I need to throw out there, just sort of off the cuff. I think Sony Santa Monica's treatment of the Norse pantheon in this book, or in this game rather, is really can't be sort of overstated how masterfully they handled this. There's a book by Neil Gaiman. He's written a lot of fiction that I can't in good conscience recommend, even though he's kind of like one of my favorites. But he's written a treatment of Norse mythology simply called Norse mythology.
Yep.
That's really great.
Yep.
I think there are a lot of beats that, like, I think I would not be surprised to find that that book was sort of instrumental in helping to shape some of the characters, like especially sort of they released 2018 in this and Norse mythology released on similar time frames, but I wouldn't be surprised if Norse mythology had some impact on Ragnarok. And I guess sort of like the spoiler free sort of version of my thoughts on this. I think in a year where you don't have something like Elden Ring, this is obviously a shoe-in for Game of the Year. Even with some of the pacing issues, which I'd love to sort of talk about. And the other thing is, I think it should have been 2 games. Like, I really do.
I can agree with that, actually, to be honest with you. But we'll get into that with the pacing stuff. But did you have anything else to add on there before we go over to Micah?
I think it's just, if you like God of War 2018, and I do recommend playing God of War 2018 before playing Ragnarok. I think
100%.
These 2 games sort of need each other, but this is the better version of 2018. Like this has more.
Okay.
It is God of War plus. Like it is additive. Like it's very good. So that's that's sort of my just like off the cuff sort of impressions.
Okay, Micah, what about you, man? Let's kick it to you.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on the general impressions because I think I've spoken my piece on previous episodes during what you've been playing. But yeah, this game is a great evolution of the very firm foundation that God of War 2018 set, especially in the combat department. I think at its purest, when you're there's a lot to enjoy about this game as far as the narrative and all that kind of stuff. But when it's at its purest, you're in combat mode and you're kind of wheeling and dealing with the blades and the axe and Draupnir, the new spear, and it hits those same rhythms so beautifully. It hits that same. The battles feel perfectly balanced as far as the difficulty and what it takes to overcome any given encounter that you come across. So I love this game. I've talked about it already. This is my game of the year from 2022. I have nothing but really fantastic things to say. It's almost like it's kind of expected from Sony Santa Monica and Sony first party just in general. This kind of it's kind of a shame because if you played a bunch of these kind of games, it may kind of wash over you in I've kind of been there, done that. But it's easy to overlook the greatness that is just filled and brimming throughout this whole game. And I think sometimes that's overlooked because we do have all these great games that are kind of similar. That have come out since 2018 or since kind of, Uncharted and The Last of Us started this whole thing, So there's a lot to love about it. I've got lots of thoughts about the pacing and things that will go there. But yeah, of course, I hold this game in very high regard.
Yeah. I think after I guess we'll just jump into the pacing because we keep kind of bringing it up. But for me, I'll be honest. For those of you that if you follow me on Twitter or you follow me on the GG app, you probably saw my initial thoughts when I finished the game. Gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, and then as I played more games over the next few weeks, I was like, okay, this 3 stars was way too harsh. I'm going to move it to a 4 because I played games that were 3 stars or less, and there's no way God of War Ragnarok is a 3-star. And you probably heard me talk about it in the last episode too, if you listen to our Game of the Year episode. But so I'll say this: I really liked how this game started, with just how it opened. Super cool, action packed. You have Freya coming in and attacking you, and you're like on a sled, and you're trying to get back to the house. I'm like, this is really stinking cool. Like, oh man. And then Odin shows up with Thor, and there's like that tension. You feel it in the room, and you're like, oh man, what's about to go down? And then you fight Thor, and it's like, dude, this is so dope. I'm all in. And then the game kind of pumps the brakes, and then you kind of coast at a bit of at a low speed for a little while. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't okay. Sure, okay, yeah, we're building some character moments. We're building some things up that are going to pay off a little bit later. And to me, I just kind of it kind of felt like it went on a little too long, kind of like that, to the point where when you get to the first Atreus section, I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
This is like Spider-Man where you play as Mary Jane, but worse. And so, anyway, all I'd say, like, by the time I got to the end of the game and I was, let a couple days go by and I was thinking about that review, I was like, you know what? The game was really cool. The combat did feel really good. That drop near spear is stupid awesome. Like, it's just really, really cool. It's graphically, it's amazing. The performances are like top notch. Like, I dare you to find another game that has levels of performances and motion capture as good as this, because it's really. If God of War gets a TV show like Last of Us is currently, it wouldn't surprise me because it's really, really good. The music is insanely good. Like, there's moments where when it hits during fights, it gets you amped up. But overall, I just didn't really feel like this game grabbed me quite like 2018 did. And so I'm interested to kind of see where this conversation goes, because something about these episodes is that typically when I go into them, when I feel kind of lukewarm on a game like this, I wind up coming away appreciating it a lot more. And I'm kind of hoping that does happen, because I really do think God of War Ragnarok is a really good game, but I just didn't really care for playing it that much. And so, and part of that is because of the pacing. And so let's kind of jump into that a little bit. Cory Barlog was a producer on this. I don't think he wasn't the director for this like he was with 2018. And that led to definitely a different feel in regards to how the story played things out. And I think that's part of the reason why we got so much time with Atreus in those moments. And I think for me, that's the biggest reason as to why I feel like the pacing is off, because those moments with Atreus felt like just like you're going with this momentum, you're doing really good with Kratos, and then all of a sudden brick wall with Atreus. And it's like, man, I didn't... when people played Spider-Man, they complained about playing as Mary Jane in that small section with Miles. Like, I didn't buy this game to play as Mary Jane or Miles, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, it's kind of dumb. But playing this game, I was like, I bought this to play as Kratos, not Atreus, and I don't really like playing as Atreus. And so that really messed things up, and I felt like the ending was kind of rushed with that assault on Asgard. It's just kind of like you get there and it's like boom, 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 boom. Oh, the game's over. It's like, okay, that was a cool ending, but like that felt really quick. And so to me, it felt really out of like all over the place. Yeah. There's still moments where it's really cool, like especially when you encounter Heimdall as Kratos and you get in that fight. I'm like, dude,
best fight in the game. Best fight in the game,
dude. It's so good. But like part of, and you guys will have to let me know about this too, because one of our write-ins from Beardsley here in Discord, he says about God of War blew my expectations in what the story was going to be. I love the story with the theme of parenting. My complaint is that I feel like the game was way too bloated with content when it comes to its upgrades and post-game quests. When I was done and seeing how much I have left, I felt very burnt. That being said, it's still a great game with a few tearjerker moments, and I feel like it's the end of something and the beginning of something new, and can't wait to see what's in store. Maybe a future Atreus-only story in the future. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But I'm wondering if part of the reason why I felt like the pacing was off was because I tried to do all these different side quests at random points, and maybe that's why I felt like, or like an additional reason as to why I felt like it was, the pacing was a little weird. So let me hear what your guys' experience was. And Micah, let me kick it to you first, and then we'll go to Nate. Okay. Kind of what your thoughts are on the pacing and the post-game content and the side quests and all that stuff.
It goes back to what I think Nate said a moment ago in his opening comments about should the second game, should God of War after 2018 be 2 or 3 games? Yeah. And that was the big question that the team had to answer for themselves, and they opted for 2. You guys, or Nate said, and I think Logan, you agreed that it should have been 3. Yeah. I don't disagree that the God of War franchise would have been served better probably with 3 games. I think ultimately for Sony Santa Monica, it's a good thing that they're only doing 2. I'm ready for them to move on personally, but that's another conversation. Okay. So the pacing comes in that they're trying to fit so darn much into this game. Yeah. And, hats off. They did a really great job of what they have, but you can feel some of that. I saw a great interview with Eric Williams, the director of God of War Ragnarok. And Corey Barlog is still like the kind of the creative head of God of War still. And so when he handed the reins off, he gave Eric 3 kind of tenets. He's like, you only have to hit 3 things. And Ragnarok has to happen. Atreus has to leave at the end, and Brock has to die. Those are the only 3 things that Corey told Eric to do, and otherwise you can fill in the gaps of how you want to get there. Okay. And so I thought that was interesting that the Brock dying thing, especially. I was like, why him? But anyway. So Eric had a tall task. Eric Williams, the director, had a tall task in fitting all this into one game. And yeah, to me, you talk about the Atreus moments, Logan. At first, that same sensation kind of fell over me, where I'm like, "Oh man, no more blades, no more Leviathan axe." But it kind of quickly went away. It kind of quickly went away though, because I think the first time you get to control him in a combat scenario, I believe, is in Ironwood with Angrboda. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Prior to that section, I think.
Oh, is it? Is it? Well, either way, when you get to that section, I feel like you're really kind of letting loose. And that section is great because of all of Angrboda's like colorful like smoke bombs she's popping off as like she's like the Atreus that usually would be the Kratos to you as Atreus. And I thought that was pretty neat. I didn't, and I thought he was pretty. There was a little bit of that like slight disappointment, but I found him to be quite capable because I thought, well, it's just going to be a bow and arrow fest now. And no, he's got melee. He hits with the bow, which is kind of weird, but even still, you get that same kind of visceral sensation, or a similar visceral sensation. So that didn't turn me off as much as it did you, Logan. But I agree that the part that fell off to me was the whole searching for Tyr in the cave system thing.
Okay,
that was just that's where it really like I'm going through tunnel after door after tunnel after door, and this all kind of looks the same, and the level design I didn't think was particularly enticing in that moment. Pretty much everything after that, in my opinion, really skyrocketed, and the pacing wasn't as much of an issue until you got to Ragnarok at the very end, whereas like that went by in a blink of an eye. The game's called Ragnarok, and it went by in like literally 50 minutes. So that kind of fell off. I'll stop talking now and pass it over to Nate about pacing issues. I hope I didn't take everything.
No, actually, I feel like you guys left me what I think is the most obvious one. I wasn't in love with the Atreus sections, but I think like once you really sort of get to play around with his combat, they turn out to be adequate. I wish there was a little something more there. But I think honestly, the pacing, the part of the pacing that sort of frustrated me the most is you go from the beginning of the game, Freya is attacking you. And then there's this sort of moment where, an Atreus, your first Atreus mission is like you're going to sort of like try and talk to Freya. And then she comes back and it's like this uneasy alliance. And that entire sequence, like my biggest issue with pacing, and this is sort of even going back to what I was saying where I really think it should have been 2 games, is the relationship with Freya is super rushed. The sort of... It doesn't feel earned. It feels great. Like, dude, like that exchange with her and Kratos when you're sort of rolling through Valheim is awesome. And they rush like that should have been sort of the as far as I'm concerned, like the closing sequence for the second game, or part of the closing sequence for the second game. That fight with Nidhogg, that's top shelf. Like that's sort of like
so cool.
Like that's cool. That's like old school God of War spectacle. Like it's just ridiculous. Yeah. It's like this crazy, and it's such a weird sort of like in and out, and you're sort of like, oh, she hates you, and then she like I still don't like you, but like I need you, and I'm gonna kind of use you to like, oh, now we're sort of like, and I just feel like that her story arc to me was way too rushed. You could have really fleshed out, I think, where you're talking about some like the sort of like the weird pacing, and they do kind of almost like hit the brakes, and the story kind of stalls out. And I think there was meant to be a lot more sort of like run-ins and encounters with her. At least that's how it feels to me. And then is sort of when you get to the other side, like after Atreus climbs the wall. And that's sort of like, that should have been, should have been like where the second game, in my opinion, ended. That moment, that sort of like that sequence. But I think the back half of that game is actually doesn't suffer. Like the end, the final assault is like, oh boy, like let's just throw everything at the wall and sort of like go crazy. But I don't know. And honestly, one of the best fights, like, so Nidhogg was great, but then too, when you're talking about like with the sequence with Angerboda, when you're fighting her grandmother, that boss fight was like,
that was really cool,
super legit. It was awesome.
I think that was a complaint that they heard from 2018 and remedied, because the God of War series is known for its huge boss fights and just boss fights in general. And 2018, you had Magni, Modi, and Balder.
You did fight a dragon.
That's kind of, you had a dragon and stuff. Is that kind of not? But like Nidhogg, Garm, Angerboda's grandma, just the Thor at the beginning, Thor at the end. Odin, it's just so many good boss fights in this game that really did the series good, for sure.
But I like I said, just sort of finishing up my thoughts, I feel like the decision to make it one game, they had two distinct stories that they wanted to tell, and they ended up chopping out a lot of things that they probably should have left in, and then putting it like, and then everything just feels rushed. Like you could have, I think, successfully, and again, I think the game's a bit of a triumph. It's a gorgeous game, but yeah, there's some real pacing issues. And I think, Logan, you talked about side quests. Honestly, I think side quests were at times the best part of the game. Like they were. Sorry, I'll interject real quick. I don't want to say they're like bad or anything, because that first one, or at least the first one I did with like the jellyfish where you release it, I'm like, this is stinking cool. Yeah.
Like, this makes the world feel kind of fantastic a little bit. Like, I'm like, man, this is like, I hate to bring this game up, but it's almost like that Breath of the Wild sort of thing, where like you discover something big and grandiose and like amazing. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. I guess you could probably fit in any kind of open world game like Skyrim or something, where you have that moment.
It's a moment of wonder, which was Breath of the Wild was good at doing, like giving you sort of these moments where you just like, you were sitting back going, whoa. Like, what did I just experience? So I don't think that's entirely, I think that's a fairly apt comparison. I would just, like I said, I think the biggest thing is there's too much of the game that there's a lot of like stall, and it's like really slow bits. And then they sort of, to almost like make up time, they just ram a bunch of narrative and exposition at you. And I'm like, you could just, I almost just feel like if you just space that out a little bit better, and you sort of give almost a more constant drip feed, like it's just, you're going to better serve the game. But one of my big things with pacing, and this is something that I wish they would have done with the game, is actually cut out all of the Atreus parts, with the exception of like, I think the last 2 times you play as him. Which is like in the Assault on Asgard, and the one before that where he goes to Asgard to try and help finding the last piece of that mask. Or those mask segments are the hits.
They're pretty bad. But like, I was sitting there thinking about it with the whole game, because there's this kind of push and pull between Kratos and Atreus, where Kratos is like, why are you going off to Asgard and meeting with Odin? Like, what are you really doing? And of course, we've been playing as Atreus, so we know what Atreus is doing. We get it, but I almost wish that we wouldn't have gotten those sections, so we could have been with Atreus or with Kratos and been like, is Atreus going to turn bad? Because at the end of the last game, it said like Kratos was going to die, or that's what the prophecy was. Is Atreus going to kill Kratos? Like, they'd have that tug of war, that kind of anxiety there, and then you play as Atreus at the end, and it's like, oh no, he's actually trying to help. It's just really shady looking, but he's trying to help. And okay, so this is okay. I'm good now. Maybe Kratos will be okay. I feel like that would have helped with the pacing a little bit, so it wouldn't have slowed down quite as much as it did, especially with that Angerboda section. But at the same time, like, I don't really know how they could have worked that around. That's kind of why I agree with what you were saying, how this should have been part 2 and then there should have been a part 3, because I would have been okay with that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in there. I when it comes to the Atreus sections in general, though, I do feel like they just those segments were just paced incredibly poorly, very, very poorly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't know that, like, because, like, let's be honest, that first time where it's like, oh, hey, now I'm controlling Atreus, it's like, this is a little bit of a surprise. You know, it feels like it has like a bit of a curveball energy, and I just feel like, and again, those parts were a little long in the tooth, but then there's other narrative bits that just felt like they should have been fleshed out. As far as, like, I don't think you're wrong, though, but you did hit on something where you're sort of talking about, like, the push and pull with Kratos and Atreus. And frankly, I think a lot of people who are dismissing the narrative and some of the themes, and we've even talked about, like, the issue of parenting with this, like, I think the sort of the exchange between Kratos and Atreus is really pretty masterful, especially when you use Thor and Odin as a counterpoint. Like, there are two pictures of fathers and sons going on here, and they're almost seem at times in parallel tracks. But then you see, like, where Kratos has sort of chosen to, you know, trust Atreus, where he's I don't know, he's not manipulating him, he's not controlling him, he's not whatever. Whereas you have the other side and the culmination of, like, the entire Thor and Odin relationship. And it's just, I mean, I frankly, like, as, you know, a fairly new father, like, that's, like, so just to give a little bit of history, and I'm not going to, like, when I played God of War 2018, Megan and I were in the process of fostering 2 boys with the intent to adopt them. And so, like, 2018 kind of, like, steamrolled me, because that did not, it ended poorly. The short version is that the older boy, they were brothers. He did not want to be in my home. He didn't like the way, like, he wanted something else. I don't think he was ready to be adopted, and there was a lot of butting heads and I was pretty gutted. And I think even just the character of Kratos in general, like, I've made no bones about it. Like, I talk about, like, I have wrestled with anger issues my entire life, and here you have a guy who in the prior games is singularly defined by his rage. And to watch like that redemption story, and then watch him, like, sort of grow as a character and grow into a father was like the redemption story was pretty fantastic there. And I think anybody who wants to sort of dismiss the narrative there of the fathers and sons, or even sort of downplay the sort of the potency of that, is really sort of, and there's a ton of issues there. I mean, like, and I said, I even talked about the Freya and Kratos exchange when she's getting to sort of air her grievances with the issues. She's like, you killed Baldur, you killed my son, you had no right to do that. And there's that exchange where she said, she looks at him and he's talking about, like, what happened with his daughter and how the Greek gods tricked him. And there's all this stuff where it's like you're really seeing a maturation of, like, and really the sort of the almost like the fruit of Kratos's journey. And he's like, you know, there's a line where Freya's like, why didn't you kill me? Why didn't you stop me? He was like, there was a lose-lose. Or even when he was talking about the Baldur, he was like, it was a lose-lose proposition. He was like, I would not allow you to kill me, and you were my friend, and I'm not going to kill my friend. Like, you know, and I'm like, this dude's awesome. Like,
yeah, it's a good juxtaposition, like you said, Nate, for Kratos and the way he handles Atreus, and then Odin and Thor and some of the family dynamics there. If you remember, at the end of the game, when Thor finally stands up to Odin, the first time Thor tells Odin no, he stabs him right through the heart.
Yep.
Odin stabs Thor. As soon as he hears the first no, as soon as he stops being a puppet in Odin's hands, he's like, "You're done. I'm done with you because you're just a tool." And so Odin's long gone as far as fatherhood stuff goes, but it is neat to see, and Atreus, it is neat to see Kratos, as well, I was about to say, kind of grow in this department. But Atreus, he's got his Brat moments in this game, just like he does in the old game.
Yes,
where, like,
he does.
In the first game, we were like, "Oh, I'm a god. Well, we can do whatever the heck we want." And Kratos like, "Okay, whoa, hold on." And they work through that. There's also this, and I love it because Kratos is really giving him, I think, age appropriately, the benefit of the doubt. He's trying to give him a longer leash. He's trying to trust him and give him more responsibility. And Atreus isn't giving Kratos much to work with. Kratos is trying to trust him, and Atreus is being a big brat. Yeah. And one of the scenes one of my favorite scenes in the whole game that I wanted to highlight, and I wrote down just some of the lines just so I wouldn't forget it, because it's all everyone's at Sindri's house, and Atreus has just gotten back from Ironwood, secretly hanging out with Angerboda, and she's like, "You can't tell anyone you've been here," and so he can't tell anyone. So the whole gang thinks that he went to Asgard and is hanging out with Odin, because he'd been talking about that. And so they're like, I think Sindri is in the bedroom with Atreus. Kratos walks in, Sindri walks out. He's like, "You better screw his head back on tight," and I mean good. And so and then they have it out, and Mimir, of course, he's there the whole time because he's like attached to Kratos. Yeah. And he's like, "That's no way to talk to your father, laddie," and all this stuff. And he's like, Atreus is like, "Well, since when do you take his side?" And Mimir, he's like, since he became the one making sense. And he's like, I got to stop him from doing this. And Mimir is like, "Something did happen. Look at me. And Freya and Tyr. Odin did this to all of us." It's just like, whoa, man. Like, Mimir brings it out. He's like, "Look at me."
It's like, I am a talking head.
Whoa. Yeah. And that's the scene where Kratos kind of they kind of gang up on him. Atreus freaks out, turns into a bear, storms out. Oh, yeah. And I told Nate this, I think, when we were talking one time. They showed such restraint because this became a meme with 2018 and everything. Boy. It was a meme. This is the only time he busted out in the whole game when he's being a complete brat. And storms out. Atreus is trying to pound onto the portal door, and he turns around. He's like, "Boy!" at the door, and Atreus looks at me. He's like, "Nah, peace. I'm out." Yeah, just like a teenager would. It was so good. It's like Kratos is like, "You just lost all credibility. You're now boy again." Yeah, and Atreus is like, "Nah, man, I'm out, Dad. Can we see you?" It's so good.
And I know we're sort of like bouncing all over the place, but like, can we take like a beat on Odin? Okay, so we know Odin's a scumbag, like through and through. Like, but dude, the portrayal in this game is like so, like, because there are times, especially as Loki, when you're talking to him, and it's like he's puts off that slimy energy, but then like there were times where I'm just gonna be honest, where I was like, well, maybe Odin's like slimy, but like he doesn't seem that slimy. Like, they almost sell like,
it's like maybe he's not.
Maybe
that
he's
bad.
a little like, maybe it's like sort of a misunderstanding, and it's just like, that like masterful. Like, and again, that's where I was sort of talking about like the Norse mythology sort of references, where Odin, and historically, we don't have a ton of like Norse mythology. A lot of it has just like was never written down. We don't like what we have is not like pretty much like Gaiman's Norse mythology anthology is pretty much the entirety of almost all the stories that we have about Norse mythology. And even in there, Odin's sort of he's like Loki is typified as a god of chaos, as a trickster god, but Odin's got a good bit of trickster in him too. I mean, and like this, they really leaned into that. Like, he's a master manipulator, and like the fact that he's just like subtle. And even as the player, I'm like, oh, he's not that bad. He seems all right. I mean, like, he's kind of like he's a guy who maybe sort of justifies the ends, and like when you look at the means, you're like, oh, I don't like what you did, but I understand why you did it.
My thing with him was like, because I definitely felt that at times, but then I saw how he treated his supposed family. Like, dude, you're a jerk. Like, there's points where I think it's after you go to Asgard and you team up with Thor at one point, and then you come back and Thor like asks a question, and Odin's just like, don't you have like somewhere to like smash stuff or whatever? Like, get out of here, get lost. I'm like, dude, you're a tool. Like, why are you? And it's like, I understand why Thor is a bit of a tool himself and why he's drunk all the time. Like, his supposed dad doesn't give a rip about him, and he treats him
look
like
at
dirt.
any time Odin is constantly trying to get people away. He's trying to like, all right, you can go now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Except for Atreus, which of course, draws the ire of the rest of the Asgardian family.
Because what's special about this dude?
Right? Yeah. So why is he? Everyone's trying to. They're trying to have a little bit of time with Odin, because you just don't get him very often. So like when the interview I saw with Eric Williams, he was talking about Heimdall. When he had just a moment with him, he was kind of like hamming it up a little bit and stuff because he just had that brief fleeting moment. You just don't get to hang out with Odin too much because he's always shooing you off because he don't care about you.
Yeah.
Well, even in the beginning,
so
that we touched on it, but like the beginning exchange where Thor sort of drops in and Odin pays Kratos and Atreus a visit. Like, Baldur is his son, and he's talking about like, well, Baldur was like my fixer. You owe me a handler. Like, I was just like, I'm like,
I'm sorry, you guys are just reminding me of all the moments I couldn't stand this loser. It made me so mad.
They get you to the point where you're like, it kind of makes sense. And I think at the end of it, like, so it's the fathers and sons narrative is really good, but there's also, I think the sort of the undercurrent there is obsessions. And you look at basically you do have these two comparisons with Kratos and Odin, right? Where Kratos has learned to he's mastered himself. He's mastered his rage. He recognizes that his anger and his wrath, they are tools that he can like, and this even goes back to 2018 when like there's that vision with Athena, and Athena's like, you'll always be a monster, and he's like, yeah, but I'm not your monster. And at that point in time, like, that sort of starts the divergent path where like you have Odin is ruled by his obsession. He's ruled by this need to know, this need to control. Like, he has to, and everything is bent towards like him getting what he wants, right? And Kratos, on the other side of that, hits this point where he could have sort of gone down the same road, like the need to protect his son and to keep his son from like doing the same things. And at some point, like that very easily in 2018 sort of becomes like where you can see like a tipping point. And in 2018, he learns to sort of like, no, and even in the beginning of Ragnarok, there's some tension there because he recognizes and even in Ragnarok, he's like, no, I need to protect him. Like, I'm not going to let these things happen, kind of. And he's like, he's coming to this point like, no, I need to let my son grow up. I need to allow him to be a man. I need to allow him to make mistakes. Do I need to hold him accountable? And there needs to be an answer. But that's new for him just as much. And so again, it's like these sort of this undercurrent of like mastering yourself or being mastered. And Kratos, I think, is in the process throughout Ragnarok of mastering himself. And even at the end, like that speech where he gives like so much of what he was trying to teach Atreus, where he's like, numb your, or kill yourself, kill yourself to the pain, or kill the pain to you, like, put it behind you, it's below you or whatever. And Kratos looks at him and says, no, that was my way, and that wasn't a good way. Your way here, like, you need to feel this, like, you need, like, this is what you do. You love people and you feel. And he's like, don't be like me. And there's so much. I mean, like I said, I think it's a very understated. It's not super on the nose, and I think a lot of people are sort of like passing that right on by, like the dangers of obsession and control versus sort of engaging in a mature relationship with the people around you.
I love that you said that, Nate, because there was a scene toward the end, I think, at one point where Kratos is like fussing at who he thinks is Tyr because he's being so passive. And he literally, I think, says something like that, like, master yourself, like, as a general of war, like, you should have the skill set that I have because we're kind of cut from the same cloth. And he almost like is fussing at Tyr for like, where's that in you? You know, like, master yourself, show me that. And so, yeah, I like that you brought that point up, Nate, because he definitely totally calls Tyr out for not mastering himself like that.
Yeah, well, as you were just talking about that, it just reminds me of that scene where it's at the end of the game and you fight Thor and they're kind of having this argument back and forth, and Thor's like, don't you know what I've done? Like, all the bad that he's done. And Kratos is like, yes, but what will you do now? You know, he's like, we have to be better for our kids. And I think what you're getting at there about Kratos' journey of mastering himself is it's kind of culminated to that point there. It's like Kratos gets it. He realizes that, I mean, he's been fighting his past for the last 2 games now, and he finally gets to a point where he's like, I can't be that person anymore, especially not for my son. And he sees some kind of kinship with Thor there, where Thor is just beating himself up for a lot of different things because of his terrible past. And Kratos is kind of extending that hand a little bit to be like, I've been in your shoes. We can't be like this for our kids because they will wind up like us or even worse. And you kind of see that with Odin and Thor. I mean, like I said earlier, I totally get why Thor was the way he was, because Odin's a jerk. He's a loser. And so you just kind of see that, and kind of how that all leads up to that, and how, you know, Kratos, in my opinion, winds up becoming kind of the role of a good father at the end of this game, and you see that too when he sends the son off on his own journey. It's like, you're ready.
Totally.
You know?
By the time the credits roll and Atreus leaves Kratos at the end, and they kind of have that heartwarming
Atreus
moment,
will stay.
it's almost like
Loki must go, dude.
I'm watching it. I'm like, is this even the same Kratos? Like, what a character arc, dude! Like, this guy has come like 180. Like, holy smokes! It you know, it may be a little too too nice of a ribbon, kind of bow to put it in, but. I liked it, man. That's, again, going back to one of the writings we had, a lot of kind of teary-eyed moments. There's several of those in this game, in my opinion, and that being one of them.
And I kind of think, too, just kind of talking about that end scene, how Kratos opens that last wardrobe, and he sees himself depicted as, like, being worshipped or whatever, but being as kind of like a more...
He's a protector.
Not because he's being feared. Yeah, he's a protector.
Yeah, a god of the people.
Yeah. And so it kind of like plays on that. And really the whole thread of Ragnarok is, are things that are supposedly prophecy destined to come out no matter what? And you kind of feel like that's going to happen, because it felt like no matter what Atreus tried to do to stop Ragnarok, it happened anyway. But then by the time you get to the end, you're like, no, it's not necessarily like what's going to happen. It's just a path. And you see that with Kratos opening that wardrobe, and Freya's like, what is that, a new prophecy? And he's like, no, it's a path. And I'm like, here we go, man. This could be where Kratos ends up.
You open the door, Logan, so I have to go there. Talk about all the prophecies. That's the large thrust behind this game is the prophecies and all these panels that they keep seeing, and the fact that Atreus has discovered a way to go like a layer deep, and I see the true prophecy behind these panels, not the one that was kind of the art on the wall. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but shout out to Faye, Kratos' wife, who is the orchestrator of this whole thing. Literally, the panel that Kratos and Atreus found at the end of 2018, where Atreus or Kratos dies in some way, and then he goes to serve Odin, that's the Norse story. Loki is Odin's son, adopted son, and so that's what's supposed to happen. But Faye secretly rewrites the prophecy. They discovered at the very, very end of the game, but it's like at one point Kratos and Freya go to visit the Norns, which are like this these three sisters that can they know the prophecies and they know what you're going to say before you say it, and like they're even tricked by it. Like Faye tricks everybody because no one knows about this prophecy, and like this is the one that actually plays out for Kratos and Atreus. It's pretty neat how they weave it all together, and this is going into what you spoke of a little bit, Nate, about Sony Santa Monica's care that they took with Norse mythology. I think this is a really cool way of how they did all this. But yeah, I wanted to shout out Faye, the character, and kind of the way she was woven into the story.
Yeah, I was going to say the Norns, what was so interesting about them was they said, we don't know the future. We just know you. And this will be the decision that you make every time. Like, these will be the decisions you make and I was like, oh, that's a really sort of like neat bend on like the idea of like the fates. It's like, no, we don't know the future. We don't see any further down the road than anybody else. We just know that what decisions you're going to make. And I was like, oh, I thought that was an interesting wrinkle. I saw in the show notes here, and we haven't really talked about this, but we did sort of touch on Tyr. And sort of like there's that part where you referenced earlier where Kratos is chiding Tyr because Tyr's kind of just like you get him out of the mine and he's this giant like coward, not even a coward, but he's just like he's
almost like a pacifist.
He's a god of pacifism, of peace now, and he wants to avoid conflict in any way, shape, or form. And the reason he sort of gives is that the abuse that he suffered at Odin's hands was so severe that like he's like I can't do anything. Like I'm broken. I'm sort of whatever. And that was really like even and we're deep into spoiler territory, but like the reveal. I just have to ask, did either one of you see, and Mike, I already sort of know your answer, but did either one of you see this coming? Like, Logan, did you see this coming?
I didn't see it coming.
So I tried my best to avoid spoilers for this game, but that got spoiled for me, and it still caught me off guard because I was like, whoa, wait a minute, hold up, what? Because that got spoiled. But I didn't necessarily know what the circumstances surrounding it was. So when Brock comes in and he's like questioning, like, hey, now what's up with this? And you're calling him Loki and we never did, blah, blah, blah. And then he turns around and stabs him in the chest. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Hold up. What? What? And then he changes and then he bounces out of there. I'm like, I knew this was going to happen at some point. I didn't know it was going to be as crazy as this. And coming. And that's when Brock dies, and I'm like,
it's a 1-2 punch. It's a big reveal plus the death of a major character. It really was the 1-2 punch.
And Brock's one of my favorite characters. I was like, why would you do this to me, guys? Come on.
Of course. And Brock, he's the one that saw through it all. He's the one that's like, hold on. How come you didn't say this plan the whole time kind of thing? How do you know how to get in there? All this stuff. And the way that they did it, it's that kind of like, once you go back and you look at all the clues, you're like, oh, what a dum-dum I was. Of course, it's Odin.
Yeah.
Apparently, and I didn't know this, I just found this out about a half hour before recording. If you go look in the closet where Tyr sleeps in Sindri's house, there's raven feathers in the corner.
Yeah,
where Odin keeps transporting it in and out.
Didn't even know that. And then
things like that.
And I didn't know this until I listened to another spoiler cast, but they were talking about like if you go back and watch all the scenes with Tyr, which eye was it that Odin was missing? Was it his left eye?
It's his right eye.
His right eye.
You'll notice that like he'll bump into things on his right side because he can't see it. There's a few times he bumps into Atreus, he bumps into a table, and I'm like, that is so wicked smart because they're telegraphing to us the players that this is not Tyr. But it's so subtle you don't catch it, and it
literally every scene he's in, you go back and watch. You're like, so when crazy. You realize it, and you see the things he's saying. He's always like he's trying to avoid Ragnarok. He's trying to get everything with the mask, anything to do with the mask. He's always pushing that agenda. It's so clear. The fact that there's no accent mark over the Y if you're looking at subtitles. Yeah. There was one other kind of major thing too. What was it?
Sorry, while you're thinking
Anyway, I
of
can't
that,
remember.
I was thinking like the subtitle. I played this game with subtitles because like I don't know if I'm like losing my hearing or what's going on. Like I just had a hard time kind of hearing what they were saying. So I turned that on. In that scene where Tyr stabs Brock, he starts speaking and it says Tyr, and then it switches to Loki halfway through the dialogue. I'm like, whoa, or not Loki, Odin. But I'm just like,
to
whoa,
Odin.
whoa. Like that's just a cool touch, right? You already know what's happening, but it's still just like.
Yeah.
Gosh dang it, I'm moving this game up to a 4.5 on GG just because this is so stinking cool.
And also, since we're in the neighborhood, let's talk briefly about Brock and Sindri. And
we have
the
to?
death
I
of
might
Brock.
tear up a little
Well,
bit.
in the moment, Sindri's holding Brock's dead body, and dude, he just zips out of there. You're always wondering. Even Atreus asks, I can't remember if it's in this game or the last game. We're like, how do you get around so fast? And they're like, oh, we have our ways and stuff. It's they could just blip on out of there.
Yeah.
And
Whatever this guild that
he
they're
blipped
part
out.
of, like that's like one of the
Yeah.
perks.
And after the game, Logan, I hope you did this part. After the game ends, quote unquote, the way you get the true quote unquote ending is you go to Brock's funeral.
I
That
did
happens.
because I saw like someone tweet out about it. Like they didn't spoil it, but they said after the credits there's a side quest you need to do to get like the real full ending. Don't skip out. And I'm like, okay, cool, that's good to know
Right.
going forward. And so I did that, and I was like, man, they did Sindri dirty in this game, dude.
Sindri,
Yeah.
man, that was so like he's.
Well, I was going to
Sorry,
say
go ahead,
though,
Nate.
but like
Go
even
ahead.
sort of like the revelation of what happened with Brock and Sindri before. And so you go to the lady in the lake, you're forging Dropnir, the spear made the Dropnir spear, made out of the Dropnir ring. But then it's like there's this sort of like Sindri's like trying to sort of stop Brock from going. And then you sort of get it's like, well, there was an accident at the forge and it was kind of my fault. And when I went to go bring Brock back from the dead, I only got 3 parts of his soul. And so he's three
out of
there's
4.
like 4 parts to his soul, and I only got 3 parts. And it's like, and so there's this whole exchange between Brock and the Lady of the Lake, and he's like, it's like she couldn't even see me. And then Brock figures out, and he's mad. Like,
He's missing that aspect that would allow him to talk to the Lady of the Forge. Yeah.
and
Yep, because he was essentially killed, then brought back from the dead. And I don't know if you guys caught this, but in Sindri doing that and reviving Brock or bringing him back from the dead, Brock now, like, he can't go on to an afterlife at that point. Like,
Which is the true tragedy.
Yeah, and I'm just like, when I was sitting there listening to him and kind of hearing him talk about that, I was like, why the heck would Sindri do that in the first? That sounds awful, And it's just... In a weird way, it kind of reminded me of like how Jesus brought Lazarus back from the dead. Like, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it just kind of made me think of that. And how you're just kind of like, you're bringing someone back from, I guess, what would be their version of paradise, right? But now, if Brock dies again, like, sure, like, he's technically like a mortal, so to speak. But if he dies again, he's not going to that. He's just kind of meh.
And that's why what they did with Sindri and how disheveled they made him look and how distraught they made him look worked so much because the weight of what he did was landing on him. And Sindri was completely changed. He's a clean freak, if you know the character. And he comes to Brock's funeral. He hadn't even showered. There's blood still on his armor.
Yeah.
He hasn't cleaned his house. Like, you go back to Sindri's house, it's still a wreck. All this, he's a changed guy. I don't know what's going to happen with Sindri in the future if we keep having more God of War. It would be. I'm curious to see if they bring that character back around again and how they resolve him. But man, that was just it's a heartbreaking story arc, and just shout out to Brock and Sindri, just great characters, and that whole situation. And there again, I kind of want to know the answer. Like, I wonder why Corey told Eric Williams that Brock had to die as one of the 3 kind of main things he had to hit when you're making the game.
To
But
elevate
anyway,
them from almost like sort of like the comic relief in 2018 to fairly serious players in Ragnarok. That's and again, I don't think you can sort of like understate sort of the mastery that Santa Monica displayed and just sort of like writing and crafting the narrative and like, dude, like, and the fact that you bought it like, you know, I was like, listen, Brock was kind of like, I'm a little simpatico because like he's a bit of a foul-mouthed, you know, kind of like rough and tumble kind of dude, and I can sort of be that way sometimes.
You a bit like a sailor there, Nate? I mean, you're kind of like a lumberjack, so I mean, it comes with the territory.
But I'm just sort of saying, like, what was sort of interesting is that he was like, he almost delighted in being crude, but he was also sort of like the one, he just didn't make much bones about, like, he didn't put much stock in being fancy or frilly. He was a brutal realist, and I kind of appreciated that about him. But then, yeah, to make Brock and Sindri more than just, like I said, the comic relief and sort of bit players, and then to sort of like have that sort of like fall out the way it did, was pretty, again, like I said, you just sort of have to give Santa Monica like props for just really, there's some like really top shelf talent in that studio as far as like building characters and narrative. Top shelf. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted there. I was working on looking at my notes and stuff. It kind of, as we're sitting here talking about this whole situation with Brock and Sindri, it kind of not reminds me, but it makes me think back to kind of what Nate was talking about, how this game, there's an underlying theme of like dealing with obsession, right? And that's something that, I mean, Sindri was obviously obsessive with a lot of things, especially being a germaphobe to a degree and keeping things clean, right? But he was obsessive in that he is kind of obsessed with his brother, not like in a bad way. Well, I guess to a degree it is kind of bad because he brought him back from the dead because he couldn't bear that loss. But in so doing, he kind of doomed himself because, like, if Brock dies again, you have to go through all that again. And there's no bringing him back at that point. So you're kind of subjecting yourself to an even worse grief.
You're damning him and you're damning yourself almost.
Yeah.
Well, and you're right there. There is the note of obsession there. The obsession, like, I have to fix this. I have to keep him alive. I have to keep him. I can't deal with, like, that obsession actually becomes like his foil, like his downfall, you know, and that's what crushes him. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And so it's just, I don't know, man, this game I think has a lot to say about just kind of watching what you're, I mean, it just makes me think of that. I can't remember the title of this book. There's this book I read about just idolatry and how, like, you become what you worship, and how in so doing you kind of lose all sense of reasoning, because once you have your idol, so to speak, it's like it's up to you to hold on to it, and if you lose it, you lose everything. And you know, just kind of from a Christian perspective here, you know, that's why we put our faith and identity in Christ, because we can't ever lose that. There's a lot of things in life we can lose, but you know, I mean, man, this is a kind of a good thing here. Like, when I was even in ministry, part of my identity, or a chunk of my identity, was in being a pastor. And when I transitioned out of that, I was like, crap, who am I even at this point? Like, what am I all about? Where's my identity at now? And I don't know. It's just kind of a good cautionary tale to check, for us, the players, to check ourselves a little bit and be like, what are you obsessing over? Because it's probably not good. And you can see clear examples of this throughout the game, that obsessing over stuff leads you to madness of a certain degree. It might not be the madness where we're like Odin, where we're kind of mean to everybody else around us and kind of solely focused on one thing and all that. It might be to the point where, like, we're so obsessed with something to where we don't know what we would do if we lost it, you know? Well, even like Atreus, he's so obsessed with trying to protect his dad that he winds up alienating his dad. And it's just, you see dude, that's a pretty big theme that I didn't even think about until you had brought that up. And now I'm seeing it, like, literally everywhere in this game.
And it's just like, the thing is, they are mastered by this desire, and in sort of giving sort of everything to that desire, it actually almost destroys everything. For these people, like Atreus's desire to protect his father at any cost actually sort of it damages the relationship between Atreus and Kratos. You brought up Odin, and we've talked a lot about Odin, but Odin's obsession with sort of knowing and being in control and sort of knowing the why of everything basically turned him into sort of the people he loved and that loved him became tools. They weren't people. They were tools. They were things to be used and discarded. And even there, it's like we can see the echoes. Like, how many times have we become sort of like singularly focused, and we treat people as a means to an end versus, this is someone created in the image. This is someone who is Imago Dei. This is another human being. And I'm not even talking about strangers. I'm talking about friends and family. Like, how many times have we just sort of like, and it's so it's a slippery slope. But and like I said, I think the fact is, like, everybody's like sort of like, oh, the fathers and sons stuff is a little on the nose, but I'm like, dude, like, you're kind of missing the more subtle undercurrent here. Is that this is like these repeated stories of like the dangers of obsession and not mastering yourself and not being governed, or being governed by the wrong things rather.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sorry, now I'm just thinking of that verse of Paul where he's talking about how he disciplines his body daily and all that. I mean, I wish I could remember the full verse. One of the listeners will have to put it in the Discord server or something.
It's in one of the Pauline epistles.
It's somewhere in there, I'm pretty sure I read it at one point. But no, that's really good. We're kind of running out of time here. There's a few things that I do want to touch on here. One of the things I kind of forgot to bring up earlier was Starbucks' question of, did you guys feel noticeably more vulnerable when playing as Atreus instead of Kratos? I was surprised by how much more under threat I felt whenever I played as him. And to be honest, I think they did that for a reason, like, because you weren't Kratos, like, you weren't, the God of War, so to speak. I don't know if I necessarily felt vulnerable, partially because I played on easy, but I think they did that for a reason, because you were supposed to feel like you just didn't really have control of your powers. You weren't really coming into your own. Because, I mean, by the end of the game, when you can turn into a bear and really take people on, it's like, dude, I feel like a monster at this point. But early on, I definitely felt pretty weak. I don't know what you guys thought. Micah, what about you?
Yeah, no, I mentioned the Atreus stuff a little bit as far as I don't think it hit me quite as hard as it hit you, Logan. But yeah, I thought he was pretty capable, and especially when you can start transforming into other things, and when you get Ingrid, the sword, Freyr's sword, that just kind of whistles around, and just like all that stuff's great. I thought so. It was nice. Nice compliments to Atreus. It's not the axe, it's not the blades, but they're nice compliments for Atreus' character, I thought. So I didn't feel particularly more vulnerable. Like, maybe after that first one, the first instance, like, okay, this is weird. I feel kind of, but once you start transforming into the wolf and stuff, it's like, get out of here, man. Like, he's capable.
Yep. Nate, what about you?
I mean, I think if like that vulnerability might be by design. Like, he's not as seasoned. He's not, and again, like he felt adequate. He didn't feel like, I think like the under threat thing, it makes sense. But I just, he was like, he didn't feel as capable as Atreus or as Kratos. Like, he was like, it's like, but I think, and again, he's supposed to feel different than Kratos, and so part of that might be he doesn't feel he's like sort of a rogue archer kind of class, and I kind of wanted him to be like a little dodgier,
more agile.
And he didn't feel as sort of like, I wanted him to be a little more slippery, and he wasn't, and you know. When he got hit, you definitely felt it. Like, it was not like Kratos gets hit and you're kind of like, okay. Like,
just shrug it off. Here's an axe.
Atreus gets hit and it's like, oh, I kind of felt that. Like, So, but I think that's it. Yeah, I think there's something there. I didn't like the parts with Atreus where I was like, these are fine. I think more than anything, his toolkit leaves a little bit to be desired, especially in the beginning.
Sure.
But
yeah, cool. Well, we got 2 questions left that we'll round out the episode on. And where do we think the story is going to go from here? I mean, what kind of do we? I guess what kind of is it pantheon? I don't know what to really describe. Where do we want to see Kratos go next? I had heard someone bring up like he take on the Egyptian gods, and I'm like, that would be dope. But like to see him fight Anubis or something. I mean, I just really like ancient Egypt. I just think I'm just kind of fascinated by that stuff. I think it's interesting. That's why I really loved Moon Knight when that was on Disney Plus. But where do you guys think this is gonna go, Nate? What do you think?
I think if there is another God of War game, one, I would love to see Atreus come back, Loki come back a little bit, or maybe even get sort of like just a different spin, like a sort of a spin-off. Because I think his story is really interesting. But I think if you're going to make a God of War game, it has to be about Kratos. And I think the theory that I've heard that I think holds the most water for me is that in sort of following that path of being a protector god, sort of a providing god, like, you know, it's what's going to happen is you're going to have one of these foreign pantheons, or maybe several foreign pantheons, hear about the god killer, because the Norse pantheon knew who he was. They're like, oh, you're the god killer.
Yes.
And that's sort of like the thing that they knew about him. And so it's like it's going to be almost like an act of aggression, where you're going to have these pantheons, like, in order to sort of like secure supremacy, or because they might see him as a potential threat or whatever, they sort of provoke hostilities, and then you're forced into sort of action to protect your people and your loved ones. That's where I think it makes the most sense to go. But I think they're going to let it. I hope. Well, I mean, Santa Monica is onto something. They've sort of got something cooking, you know. Anyways, but I think that's if you bring Kratos back, that's how you have to do it. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what you are thinking there, Nate. I don't know how you have a game with Atreus. Let's say it's like Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, like some sort of, you know, shorter spin-off game, but he gets his own game. How do you call it God of War?
I wouldn't. I'd call it Loki.
He plays Atreus the whole time. I don't know, but you can't do that though. You can't drop the God of War name. I don't think you can if you're Sony. So it's sort of a weird between a rock and a hard place that they're in with that one. That seems like the obvious, clear answer. It's like, yeah, Atreus left, and they're going to follow him because Kratos is all done. I don't think you have a product on the shelf that says God of War and you don't control Kratos. I just don't think you do that. So to answer the question, I think God of War takes a long break. I don't think we get any I don't think there's going to be an Atreus spinoff game. I don't think there's going to be anything like that. I think we're going to have a long break, and we're not getting anything for a while. I think if it comes back, could get a new whole Pantheon trilogy or something. I think they might just go back and like redo the Greece stuff and like call it God of War again, and we're redoing Greece. And it's just a whole new take on the Greece thing. I feel like they would do that before going to like Egypt or something. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I don't know though.
I did hear one thing floating around, and this is more like people just joking. Like, what if Kratos meets Jesus? And I'm like, let's not do that, because I don't really trust people who aren't believers to put this together and it not be weird.
Let's just avoid the whole second covenant violation thing.
Yeah. We've already got that I Am Jesus Christ game coming out, and I'm like, no, let's just avoid that territory. Let's not get into that.
We're second commandment violation rather than second covenant.
Yeah, let's just wait, words are hard.
We knew what you're talking about.
Yeah. So last question, and this comes from Nate's best boy, Josh Broccolo. He writes in and asks, now I'm going to read this question, and I'm going to tell the story of what happened in the Discord server. And the patron specific channel in the Discord server after I read this. Anyway, he writes in and he asks, which is the great Ragnarok, Thor or God of War? So again, I didn't get a chance to make a Patreon post like I normally do for these episodes, and I was like, hey guys, here's the thing in Discord. Let us know what your questions are, and we'll get them into the show. So he wrote that in, and he adds in things to take note of. 1, Thor Ragnarok currently has a 93 on Rotten Tomatoes. God of War doesn't even have a Rotten Tomatoes page. 2, Thor Ragnarok appeals to a wide audience, not just nerds with 25 hours to kill. 3, Thor... I didn't read that second one. That's pretty funny. 3, Thor Ragnarok has much more Jeff Goldblum than God of War. And so I chimed in because when he said Thor Ragnarok, I was thinking, oh, that's the new Thor movie, the one where... like, I think it's Odin or whatever. Not Odin. What's his name? Zeus blows off Thor's clothes and he's standing there like all naked and stuff. And I was like, and so I added, it's like, here's a 4th reason for Josh. He just likes the naked scene with Chris Hemsworth. And that's why he's bringing this up. Because again, I'm a high school teacher. Their stupid humor and comebacks hasn't rubbed off on me. And he comes back with ... Are you thinking of Love and Thunder? And I was like, wait. Which one is Thor Ragnarok? And he's like, it's the 3rd one, man. And Kokoro Odaki even came and was like, it's the 3rd Thor movie, which it features at most a shirtless Hemsworth. And I was like, I will see myself out now at this point. So
I would not blame you for muting Josh. I tell him this all the time. It's like, listen, Josh, I shouldn't expect better, but I do. I expect more from you, Joshua. I shouldn't, but I do.
Oh man. I'll say this. I'll actually give Josh a genuine answer. Before recording this episode, I would have said Thor Ragnarok. After recording, it's the same thing. I come into these episodes, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about the game. Now I'm like, nah, I appreciate it a lot more. I'm gonna say this easily, just so I don't have to watch another stupid Marvel movie.
I know Josh is just trying to be a huge troll, so I'll just give him a troll answer. Breath of the Wild is a mid game. And I mean it.
Sorry.
This will be a YouTube short on the YouTube channel. 100%. Oh my gosh. Y'all, okay, thank you for listening to this episode of the Reformed Gamers. Before we let you go, it's our 2nd episode of the month, which means we're thanking our patrons over on patreon.com/the Reformed Gamers. If you want to continue supporting us over there,
Stone Cold, I mean it.
I can't, Jesse's so savage. I can't believe he looked dead at the camera. Was like, and I mean it. It's like, oh my god!
It's just like
Micah's got to change his name to Kratos over here. He's about to become the Greek version of God of War up in his business for the savagery. Oh my gosh! Oh, Calliope! You know what's funny? We were talking. So me and my wife were talking. Like, what are we gonna name our next kid when we go through the adoption process again? And I was like, no joke, don't laugh at me. What about Calliope? And she's like, I like it, but where did you hear that from? I'm like, God of War. And she's like, no, we're not. Are you serious? I was like,
dude. No.
I was like, yeah, because when they get in trouble, whatever, I'm like, Calliope. You know, it'd just be so cool. And she's like, no, stop. What? Why? No. How many Dr. Peppers a day do you have? No, stop. Anyway, patrons, thank you so much for supporting us. Let's read them here. Micah, you want blue or red this time?
I'll go ahead and start it off here. Aaron L. White, Alex Castellanos, Boulder, Chris Freeman, Christopher Commander, David Matthews, Derek Smith, Dorian Taylor, Jake Walker, Jimmy Changa, John Hannon, Jonathan Harrison, Josh Broccolo, love you, buddy, Joshua the Super Llama Johnson, Kokorodaki, Luke Strang, Matt Edwards,
Matthew White Chocolate McDougal, Matthew Millsap, Melvin Benson V, Micah Hendrick, Michael Toller, Mr. Butts, Nate McKeever, Richard Marroquin, Ryan1701E, Sam White, Samuel Alicio, Savone Pena, Sojourner, Third Strongest Mole, Tim Syriac, Vincent U, Wesley Ray, Xavier Medina, correct me if I'm wrong, Yuki Ali, Zachary Nelson. Y'all, thank you for supporting us over on patreon.com, helping us keep the lights on, the controllers charged. And what's that thing Skinner says? Helping me with my addictive habit. It's not an addictive habit. I don't have a habit about collecting platinum trophies anymore. I just like playing all the Persona games, which I will be doing this month. Super excited. Although, now that I think about it, once Dead Space gets here, Persona's going to be dead to me for for about a week. So
That's like really soon. Dead Space is like the week that this episode goes public.
well, you know what? And then the new SpongeBob game. I don't know how I'm going to fit all these games in. I'm joking about that. I'm joking about that. I did draft that SpongeBob game, though. We'll see how it does. Anyway, dear listeners, before we let you go, some recos, some things that you need to check out. Obviously, we would recommend God of War Ragnarok. Even me, who was a little lukewarm on the game, I thought, like I said, the performances alone, oh my goodness. It's just high tier stuff. So good, so good. But Nate, what's something or some things the dear listeners should check out? Obviously, Backlog Breakdown, if they're not listening to it already.
I never say no to checking out, our little endeavor over there, the Backlog Breakdown. I have one that's not so serious and one that's kind of serious. So there's a podcast called the Greystone Conversations. Mark Garcia, he's a teaching elder in the OPC right now, I think. He hosts that. They're more theologically sort of like oriented. I'm really enjoying them for some just sort of personal study and sort of a side project that I'm kind of working on. But so I just recommend that podcast. It was one of those things where they took a little bit of a hiatus, but they're back now. And the content's just, it's sort of these like hour long sort of segments where it's very conversational for the most part. It's really good stuff. The other thing is this right here is basically,
Oh my gosh.
it's my favorite thing right now.
Is that a
No,
Four
it's
Loko,
a Mountain
Nate?
Dew Energy Pitch Black, which is basically, do you remember the Mountain Dew Black labels? It's like that, but with
Yes.
like more caffeine and less calories. They're delicious.
Okay. So if it had just a drop of alcohol, it would be a Four Loko.
I mean,
I can only imagine our audio only listeners are like, wait a minute, what? They're drinking on this podcast?
I mean,
No drinking being done.
caffeinated beverages. But
Well, yeah, I got some coffee. in
the
here.
Mountain Dew Energy
have a Sonic,
Pitch Black.
that's all.
It's like a sort of a limited edition thing. They're delicious. If you like the Mountain Dew Black labels, you can find them on shelves occasionally, and they are stupid tasty. So, just saying.
I was gonna say I can endorse the Mountain Dew Black Labels because I think it was you that got me into them a couple of years ago. Because didn't they have like a white label too?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did both. Both were fantastic, and I don't normally drink Mountain Dew, but those were
They were
pretty solid,
real
not
good.
gonna
I drank
lie.
a whole bunch of that. And I try not to drink
man.
soda and energy drinks, but
Yeah.
I drink a
yeah.
Yeah. What can you do, Micah? Man, I'm just gonna say this. Micah's gonna give us Reco, and I wholly endorse it. Now he could probably change it up here and totally mess with me, but
No, I'm not changing it up, man. So 2 episodes will be out by the time this goes public, but the premiere for The Last of Us on HBO was masterful. Like, holy smokes, it was super duper good. Like I hold The Last of Us in high regard, as listeners know.
yeah.
I don't have a single complaint about what I saw in episode 1. Not a single complaint. Every fear I had about how they would handle it has fallen away. Everything, and they've delivered what I was hoping and then some with this. I don't want to go into it. It's simply excellent. Of course, viewer discretion advised. It's mature content, a lot of blood and gore, a lot of language.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, man, good grief, I'm kind of on cloud 9 about how good this is. I kind of can't believe it. It's excellent.
Yeah. I obviously we'll do an episode after we've watched all of the episodes because I thought about, should we do an episode, like record an episode after each episode? And like we could do that for like the SEO and all
much.
that, but I'm like, I'd rather do it at the end so that way like we kind of get caught up with everybody else, and then there's some people who listen to the show and they're not probably not going to get a chance to say with it week to week. So it's like I'd rather just wait until
Right.
the end. But yeah, I was waiting for like just something to come up and me be like, okay, that's it, I'm done with this. But I got to the end, I was like, okay, episode 2's next week. I'll set an alarm. I wish I could watch it now, but
Yeah.
like I was surprised. I was surprised. It was really
Super
good.
great premiere.
And what I liked about it, they changed enough to where it was different in certain parts, but it still was the same. And I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I'm good with this.
Yeah,
I'm good with
it
this.
was really super well done. I'm super tickled. I can't believe it.
Yeah. So here we go, man. This should be good. I'm excited. Episode 2 is supposed to have clickers in it, and I'm like, let's go, baby.
Yeah, episode 2 is directed by Neil Druckmann as well. So I'm looking forward to see what happens there.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until all of season 1 is released, and then I'm just going to hop on HBO Plus for like a week or two, and watch the mess out of it, and then sort of like subservices drive me nuts, but that's a different.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah.
Yep. I won't bring up Game Pass. But no, as far as my recos go, so I have heard, like, I've been wanting to get back into more manga and anime this year, just because, I got into Spy Family last year, watched pretty much all of the Universal Century Timeline shows of Mobile Suit Gundam, and I was like, man, I really enjoy just sitting down and watching a new anime and just seeing what it's there and reading an anime or reading a manga. Like, I want to get back into that. And this year, I tried getting into Chainsaw Man, but I'm like, I'm not really digging the themes. Denji is kind of a perv, and I'm like, it's not as funny as it was like with Naruto. Naruto is kind of like that little junior high kid, like, okay, whatever, it's annoying, let's get to the fights. Denji, it's like, this is his whole motivation, is like he wants to touch women, and so he's doing the deals. And I'm like, I'm not vibing with this. So let me check something out. And I keep seeing One Piece recommended to me, and I'm like, man, I've heard so much about this. This One Piece game is coming out. It looks real good. Skinner drafted as a first-round pick. And, man, I was like, I'm going to sit down and check this show out. I'm 10, 11 episodes in, and I'm like, yo, One Piece is pretty stinking dope. Like, it shocked me. I was like, I might binge this show. And people on Twitter were like, hold up, there's over 1,000 episodes, right? You really want to binge this? And I'm like, I think I have a different definition of binge. What I mean is whenever I watch something, I'm going to watch like 5 episodes at a time. But that'll be like randomly spursed throughout the week. So my reco is One Piece. Like, even if you check out the first 10 episodes, it's a good time. Like, and plus, I didn't expect the show to be as heartfelt as it is. There's this dog that has a little backstory in episode, I think, 6 through 8. Trying to remember, I can't remember. It's the whole Captain Buggy thing, which is just a ridiculous.
Wait, you don't like pirate clowns?
What
do you have against pirate clowns?
Oh, nothing. I'm just saying it's ridiculous. The fact that he can, I don't want to spoil it for people, but the fact that like his whole powers, he can like separate parts of his body and move around and do different tricks. I'm like, this is really creepy, really ridiculous, but mostly creepy. And I don't know. Okay, I'm digging it. Like, just, I don't know what it is. Like, there's just so much this show does, and it's just like, this is so cool. I just want to watch it. And so,
how are you watching it? Like, what service are you watching?
I'm watching it on Crunchyroll, so I'm watching it subbed.
Dude,
So,
I'm 100 episodes in at this point in time, and what I will say is that the show, I like it. I'm probably not as sold on it as maybe you are, Logan, but I do kind of love just the absurdist nature of it. Where it's like, this is ridiculous and it's dumb, but I can't stop watching.
Yeah. That's what really drew me in, was especially Luffy. And like, I showed my wife some scenes of it, and she's like, what is up with his face? Why does it look like that? I'm like, he's a rubber pirate. He's made out of rubber. He does the stretchy thing. And she's like,
He ate the gum fruit.
Okay, yeah, he ate the gum fruit. Just his stupid moves, gum bullet and gum. Oh my god, it's your typical shonen stuff, but it's wild. Look, just watch it, give it a try, see what you think, have some fun with it. Worst case scenario, you walk away from it, you're like, dude, Logan has some terrible taste in anime. Oh my gosh, but I mean, I think there's a reason it's gone over 1,000 episodes. There's I don't know how many volumes of the manga. It's super popular, so if you don't get into it, it's not my fault. You just have bad taste. I'll just say that. So, I'm kidding. I don't really mean to be confrontational, but hey, if you don't want to be confrontational and you like what we do here, you can support us over on Patreon. We already talked about that. Yeah. Wow, I made this awkward. Nate, hey man, thank you for coming on the show. Talking about God of War with us. We need to end the show. If you want to check out extra content, YouTube is a great place for that. We'll be ramping up content in February for the rest of the year, and you can enjoy that over there. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do all that stuff. Comment on how much you hate my opinion on the Dead Space box art remake stuff. I don't care. Website has links to all of our stuff, Discord, all that jazz, Twitter, Facebook, all the socials. Links are in your show notes. You can enjoy that over there. But yeah, without further ado, thank you for checking out this episode of the Reformed Gamers. I've been Logan. That's been Micah. That's been Nate. Until next time, be a dear. Keep it locked here. We'll see you in the next episode.